is I don't know why we talk about the femaleness as it relates to ACLs, because we cannot make our female athletes not female. You can blame it on whatever you want, Q angle or intercondylar knots. There's a lot of stuff you could say about females that may make them more susceptible. It's entirely irrelevant. It is literally much ado about nothing, because you can't make your female athletes into anything but female athletes. But what you can do is make them stronger.
All right, hey everybody, I'm your host, Anthony Renna. Welcome to episode 415 of the Strength Coach Podcast. We talk about relevant topics with top coaches in the fitness industry to help you become a better coach, trainer, therapist, or business owner. All right, we're brought to you by Perform Better. This weekend, the last Perform Better Functional Training Summit of the season in Providence, August 14th to the 16th. Not too late, so if you're in the area, head on over. Coach Boyle will actually be there. We're going to talk to him a little bit about that today. But it doesn't end there in terms of education for Perform Better. They do a bunch of education at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute in Rhode Island. They have a speaker school coming up, a movement workshop, and a business workshop, all at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute. So check it out at performbetter.com. All right, today I talked to Coach Boyle about his trip to Ireland, where he was speaking for the Irish Strength Coach Association Conference. We talked about single leg squat standards for athletes and adults. That came from a Erica Mulholland tweet about young girls and ACL and where that standard, where we want to see them, what level, at least what can they do for a single leg squat. And then we talked about different speeds of elasticity, and that comes from a Ken Vick tweet. And I thought it was so interesting. I contacted Ken because I want to get him on the show. So we'll have him coming up in the next month or two. And then we talked about, should we be training long, slow distance in the off season if athletes aren't playing any sport? So get Coach Boyle's take on that one. Remember, we started a new segment a couple episodes ago with the Business for Unicorns guys, Mark Fisher, Michael Keeler, Pete Dupuis, and Ben Picard. And we're calling it the Business for Unicorns Fitness Business Power Play. So you can check out businessforunicorns.com. They have a ton of free resources. And by the way, it's not just if you own a business, or a facility. So if you're just a trainer, there's a lot of stuff that they're talking about. They have a lot of great resources that you can check out. But today's episode, Pete Dupuis is going to talk about a testing day as a low barrier offer for performance training gym owners. So in this case, it'd be good if you had a gym, performance training gym. And if you're working with youth athletes, and how if you have a testing day, you can move away from this idea about seasonal athlete sessions. So how it's more like, okay, it's the fall season, or, it's the winter session or the summer session. So Pete's going to talk to you about using a testing day as to try to get away from that idea and kind of keep them all year round. Good stuff coming up. So check it out from Pete Dupuis.
Business for Unicorns presents the Fitness Business Power Play. Today I'm going to share with you an actionable strategy that'll help you build a gym and the life you love. If you find value in this information, I want you to head over to businessforunicorns.com, or you can click on the link in the show notes, and there you'll be able to access a ton of other business building information and resources. So today I want to specifically talk to the performance training gym owners in the audience and those who work with youth athletes, and in particular, the ones who tend to batch their training in a seasonal format. So you'd be the ones who say, our fall session's about to start, please sign up, or get on board for the spring session or some summer session now. And really, these are people who are typically following the academic calendar, because that's how the youth sports scene tends to go from season to season. And I see a number of gym owners in this small subset of the industry who make the mistake of just ending a session, just finishing the fall and saying, now it's time for the winter session, please sign up. And there's a missed opportunity in not organizing a recurring and consistent testing day of some sort. Because if you do this right, it'll serve as a retention tool, it'll be a lead magnet, it'll be a showcase event for your space, And it's a really quick and easy thing to reproduce every 90 days or so. So let's talk about the key benefits of building in a testing day. Sometimes in my facility, we call this a combine day. And the first of the four would be retention. As I mentioned, athletes and parents want to see real progress. They don't just want to feel it. They're really people who want to measure improvement, as we all know that training is becoming increasingly data driven. And this is a place where you can collect that data and deliver it after the fact. Second benefit, generates leads. We open this up to the public. We build a bring a friend component into what we do. And it's great for us to drive some word of mouth growth. Third benefit would be differentiation. So we have certain equipment in our space that competitors just don't have. And so if you're one of those gyms, say the only one in your market that has force plates, or maybe has a piece of the Proteus technology, or timing gates for sprinting, something that the people down the road or around the corner don't have, this is an opportunity to differentiate your operation and showcase it a little bit to the community for short money or for free, if that's how you choose to do the event. And then the fourth benefit would be that this is just a good LBO. The LBO being a low barrier offer. You can make it free, you can make it low cost. This is for first time visitors who come through the door. And it's really just a low stakes way to get your foot in the door with your gym. So your benefits, retention, leads, differentiation, and the LBO. Now, how do we execute it? Well, this is really three common sense steps. First, we set the date and we promote it. That means in our case, that's usually 10 to 14 days out. We say the next one's coming. Time to shoot us an email if you'd like to RSVP. Here's a link you can use to spread the word to your friends. But what we're really doing is explaining what's being tested, and we're going to emphasize the tech we're using or the niche specific things that we'll be quantifying. And then we'll move to step two, which is just to deliver a great experience. So get as many people in there as possible, warm them up thoroughly, work them through a series of tests. In our case, it's usually between 8 and 10 tests. And then we'll accumulate information on things like vertical jump, sprint times. In our case, we're doing some rotational med ball work for velocity. There's a number of kind of pieces of data that we're going to collect, and we're going to put it all in one place because step three is the follow-up. And so what we do, typically 48 hours after the event, we reach out and we send a custom PDF that says, these are the things you tested on. This is why we test them. This is how it translates to the field or the court or the ice where you're competing. And this is what your final number was and where it puts you within the average athlete population that you're in. So how did your numbers stack up in relation to your peers? And then we say, should you decide you'd like to work with us long term, we will address these things by doing X, Y, and Z. And by the way, here is a time-bound, time-sensitive offer. So a call to action to drive some business into the gym. This is the follow-up piece. It's important. It's the how we will build you from here, should you decide to either A, join, or B, continue from the last season into this next one. Now, what I really want to make sure you do is just don't let seasons simply fade away. A well-executed testing day, it's going to keep clients engaged, it's going to bring in some new faces, and it's going to reinforce your value to the local community, to the athletes you already work with, and you're going to do it all without a really hard sell. So if you want more strategies for building a gym and a life you love, click the link in the show notes for more resources, or again, visit businessunicorns.com. And in this resource list, there's the little book of marketing secrets. It's a no fluff, under half-hour read that my colleague Mark Fisher made. It covers everything you need to know to get more leads, get more clients. So if that's of interest to you, check out gymmarketingsecretsbook.com to get instant access and grab a free digital copy.
All right, guys, now it's time for the MBSC.TV and StrengthCoach.com. Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle, StrengthCoach.com. Articles, videos, one of the longest running forums in strength and conditioning. You can try it out at StrengthCoach.com for 7 days for free. Go to StrengthCoach.com to start your free trial. MBSC.TV, you're a fly on the wall at MBSC with staff meetings, programs, seminars, and in-services from top coaches. You can try that out for 7 days for free at MBSC.TV. Coach Boyle off of the plane from Ireland. How you feeling?
I actually feel great. I maybe tomorrow I'll feel worse. I didn't sleep great last night. The time change is a little bit of an issue going in that direction, but I really don't feel too bad. Someone did say to me when they met me, they said, you're bigger than I thought. You're always slumped in that chair when you're doing the podcast. So I was like, okay, I probably should be like this.
That,
Try to sit up a little taller and
or get the camera away from you. Add some,
yeah, I don't know something. I
more
don't know.
torso. Uh, Mike, I saw you posted a picture. First of all, the church. I mean, you were in what was it called? Was it the Irish Strength and Conditioning Association
Irish
conference?
Strength Coaches Association, I
Okay.
believe, is the correct name.
Cool. And you were telling me they try to find interesting places. That was an interesting place. It was beautiful.
Yes, it was a former, I think they said a former Presbyterian church that had been converted into function space. So it really was, it was almost a little intimidating. You get in there and you think, oh, I was worried about getting struck by lightning, but I swore a little. I think I said shit a couple times, but there were no F-bombs. So
We were talking earlier, I think in order to get people, some butts in the seats nowadays, it's really important to try to do some different things. And that's one thing that they did differently. Then they had these kind of individual tables. I was telling you, Allie Gilbert did that at her summit, and she's doing some different things as well. And you said they had lunch. One thing I want to talk to you about, while you were doing your lecture, were you kind of stopping it? Because I saw in the middle they had all the trap bars set up, et cetera. Were you kind of going back and forth, or did you have like a lecture practical?
I just lecture. I didn't end up doing a whole lot of practical. In my typical form, I talked too long. So at the end of day 2, we did a little bit of practical stuff, but they did have it set up so that you could kind of drop right in there and do whatever you want to do. They had Black Box Fitness, Greg Bradley, who's uh, based in Belfast over there. They really control a lot of the UK market. They do a lot of the Premier League teams and things like that. So they brought in equipment and they were a big sponsor. They're kind of I guess they're the Perform Better of the United Kingdom. And because we were in Belfast, we were in the United Kingdom, which is another thing that's interesting in terms of it's not technically Ireland. Northern Ireland is part of United Kingdom.
Perform Better this week, actually. So you're going right down to Providence, not too far though. Your talk, can you just give a quick overview on what does this mean? It's programming for the personal trainer, right?
It's a talk probably that's been done before, but in my fine Coach Parker tradition, probably not for this audience in terms of, it was very interesting. When I was in Ireland, I said, how many people? I was over there in 2014 with another Irish Coaches Association that had just started. I said, how many people were here in 2014? And less than 10% of the people were there. So what I'm going to do is go back through the program design process. This is how we design our programs, primarily our adult programming, because I think when you go to Perform Better, you're dealing with, I'm going to say it's 90% personal trainers. And so just going through that process of how we train and why do we train the way that we do and how do we do it in terms of why. So it kind of goes back to the things we've talked about a lot about the podcast. Why aren't we using bars? Why do our adults not back squat? Why do they not deadlift? Why do why do they not bench press? I mean, our adults are doing primarily unilateral stuff. They're doing lots of dumbbell upper body movements and just kind of it's sort of, and I didn't use the term orthopedic cost, but it sort of rolls in the orthopedic cost and joint friendly idea with the organizational process of, hey, this is how we organize the workout. This is what the first 15 minutes looks like. This is what we're considering power for our adult clients. So we'll go through a little bit about warm up, a little bit about power, and a little bit about strength, and talk about why we're making the choices that we're making from a strength training perspective. So it's what I've found in the past is I stray away sometimes, and I realize I'm probably not serving the audience. That audience that comes there probably is going to benefit greatly from understanding why we do the adult training the way that we do it, because in our situation, our adult training is a huge part of our business, and it's something that we're really good at. So I think that's something that you want to share with the Perform Better audience.
Listen, this is what the direction obviously, that I've gone here on the podcast. You know, we've had Jess Tolman on a couple weeks ago. You and I were talking about, we always talk about different adult population things or personal training things. I have Mark Fisher on now doing the business of fitness segment, and that really does pertain to gym owners. Let's be honest. I mean, we're talking to Mike Boyle, and I think you said 70% of your business is now from the adult population. And that's why when people ask me like the direction or the topics that I'm going, it might not always be about strength. A strength coach working with a team, but it's really important. A lot of that stuff applies to the personal trainer anyway, but it's really important because I think eventually you're going to have to work with the general population anyway. So I think it's important even for strength coaches to hear.
Yeah, and I think when you think, I mean, we've always had the title of the Strength Coach podcast, but I think we've always kind of surfed that curve a little bit of
Sure.
strength and conditioning versus personal training. Because again, if you're thinking about audience, I don't know how many more personal trainers there are than strength coaches, but if I said there was 10 for every one, I don't think I'd be too far off.
Yeah, you're probably right. Interestingly enough, they I don't know his name, but the kid from Strength Coach Network, he had
Yes.
posted some CDs. Back in the day, he used to put the podcast, the Strength Coach podcast, onto CDs and listen to him on his ride to Harvard. And it just
Justin Lima. Yeah, he's
okay.
going to Providence Summit actually.
Yeah, he said that. That was cool. That was very cool. It's just wild that he used to do that. Which, by the way, the number one like thank you that I used to get at any conference was, "Hey, thanks for the podcast. You make my commute so much better." Because that's where so many people listen to it. So
That's what I do, honestly.
yeah,
I would say 50% of the time I'm in the car, I have a podcast on. So, and I've said this to you and to lots of other people. Podcasts are where I would say the majority of the learning takes place. It actually was interesting because David Nolan, who organized the conference, had done a research study and asked how personal trainers and strength coaches, or strength coaches primarily, were learning. And number one was actually peer-to-peer conversation. And number two, I think, was podcasts.
wow, very
So
cool, Mike. Erica Mulholland had a post that said, "Stop blaming ACL tears on female anatomy and hormones when your girls are failing to get in the gym. They don't even know the strength numbers." You had posted, you said they need to get 5 one-leg squats at 25% of body weight minimum. So, number one, can we just clarify this a little bit? How low is that too? I think, was that Mark doing the single
that
leg?
was Mark doing it. Yeah. And we're trying to get parallel. We're not trying to be below parallel. That's why somebody said, "Can they do a pistol squat?" And I'm like, I don't know. We don't do them. But
Yeah.
we would like to be kind of middle of the thigh parallel to the floor. And we would like them to be able to handle, the females to be able to handle 25% of their body weight in external load. So a quarter of their body weight. If somebody weighs 160, then they should be able to do 5 one-leg squats with 40 pounds. Whether we've really kind of preferentially gone to that sandbag zercher, which people like, or a combination of sandbag zercher and sand collars or weight vests or, dumbbells, whatever it is. But I think she's right. And I've said this, I did an ACL talk a long time ago. And one of the things that I said is, I don't know why we talk about the femaleness as it relates to ACLs, because we cannot make our female athletes not female. So it you can blame it on whatever you want, Q angle or intercondylar notch. There's a lot of stuff you could say about females that may make them more susceptible, but it's entirely irrelevant. It is literally much ado about nothing, because you can't, although we have some males who are trying to make themselves into females, so I guess it's not completely impossible. But in general, you can't make your female athletes into anything but female athletes. But what you can do is make them stronger. And I think the strength thing is a big thing. And we're really big on the decelerative ability, the eccentric ability. So sticking those landings in unilateral plyos, sticking landings in hops, sticking landings in bounds, sticking landings at 90 degrees in the hop, sticking landings at 90 or at 45 degrees in the hop, sticking landings at 45 degrees in the bound, because when you look at the mechanism of injury, it is generally that they don't have enough braking power. So part of that is strength. Part of that is eccentric strength or eccentric ability, the ability to throw the brakes on and to be able to control the body weight that's coming behind those brakes. So I think she's 100% right, which was the reason that I kind of reposted it and then took it one step further.
Yeah. Mike, would you say though, okay, there are some of the things we could take into female in terms of like the Q angle to say like, okay, if she's not landing right, we're trying these landings and the knee just keeps kind of valgus, keeps going valgus. Would you start to say, hey, maybe there's some abduction or like, so we
I
should
mean, I
look
think
at
you
some of
could
this.
look at somebody and say, hey,
Yeah.
we need to deal with their hips a little bit. But in
Yeah.
general, it's the same thing in terms of, even if you watch, because those in that the video of Mark uh, isn't as good. I have another one from the front, and people are saying, "Oh, his knees wobbling," and I'm like, "Yeah, his knees wobbling," which is great. I want his knee to wobble. I want him to be able to control that wobble, because cutting and changing direction in sport is not going to be perfect, and you may very much end up in valgus, and you may end up where your knee is not properly positioned over your foot or over your big toe, or wherever you want it to be. And you've got to be able to get in all those. It's not quite the go to extreme, but I think you do have to be able to look at this and think you've got to be able to decelerate in a bunch of different positions.
Wow, it's funny. I'm like thinking, I'm questioning my coaching skills now, my observation skills, because I was like, holy cow, that is really good form. I was kind of looking at his angle of his spine to tibia angle was literally perfect from the angle you
Yeah,
had.
that
And
one was actually pretty good. If you watch the other one that I have from the front, though, you'll see a
okay,
little of this.
yeah,
And some people will. It's really funny. Some people get all freaked out about it. I'm like, no, no. And I wish I could remember who said it at a seminar to give them the credit, and I've said this before on the podcast, but somebody said that you want some bad reps. That if you're not getting some bad reps, and it might have been Kevin Wilk in his knee rehab uh, seminar, but I'm not sure. But it was basically that if you're not getting some bad reps, you're probably not loading heavy enough. If somebody can do it perfect without it really challenging their stability, without it kind of challenging their hip and their ankle and their ability to control sort of frontal plane movement, then you probably don't have enough load. And what you want to see is their writing ability. Like, can they bring themselves back to where they're supposed to be? Because I can remember even when Mark was coming back from his ACL, he'd say things like, "Oh, that one wasn't great. My knee kind of caved in a little bit." And developing the ability to know that is important too. So I think I think we just have to be more aware of not being so nitpicky about everything. And there's some guys where it's way too load oriented, and you think all they care about is the load. I watched a squat the other day where someone said, "Oh, this is so and so, and she just set the squat record for a female athlete at our gym," and it was horrendous. So much so that I felt bad. I was like, I can't repost it, and I just unfollowed the guy. I was like, okay, I can't. If he would post that, I can't really continue to follow his
yeah,
Instagram. It was that bad, but I wanted to post and be like, what the actual fuck, excuse my language, are you doing? Where you watch this incredibly bad bilateral back squat with knee wraps and a belt, and then you sort of applaud like, oh my God, that was a record. And you just look and think, I mean, for what? You know what I mean? It was terrible.
yeah. Mike, do you have a male standard, male female? Like, is there a
I
little
would want
different?
50% of body weight.
50. Okay.
That's why that video of Mark was 50%. And that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to get our guys to, because that goes back to the Alex Natera thing, that 50% equates to double body weight. So
Okay.
most people are saying that if you're looking at double body weight as being the standard for strong enough, then our standard for strong enough becomes 50% of body weight in a single leg squat. And that, because you kind of get into the whole Natera math thing in terms of 84% of the total body weight really is what you're handling. So the 84% plus another 50 gets you into the range of what you would get when you were double body weight squatting on one leg.
Yeah, I love these having at least these standards. I think it's really important. I think it makes it easy for the rest of us to be like, oh yeah, 25% for them. And what about we're talking about adults here. You're going to Providence. You just came back from Ireland. I'm talking about all these things. And what about age? So would you say, your adult population now? Would you start to say, hey, my 30 to 50 year olds, I want to see them do 25. Like
I
lower
want to
those.
see them be able to do a one leg squat. That would be my goal.
Okay,
So if I can
to
get my
parallel.
adults to do one leg squats,
Hmm.
I think we're in a pretty good spot. Obviously, we'd
Excellent.
like to load them. I mean, I'd love to see, I'd love to see my adult males get to that female standard and be able to handle 25% of their body weight. But I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is for a
Yeah.
200-pound, 50-year-old guy to think that, okay, we're going to do a one leg squat with 50 pounds. It might be a lot, but and
Yeah.
somebody asked me that, might have been on the forum, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, I said, because I mean, what we find with our adults is there's a lot more split stance stuff in terms of rear foot elevated split squat. Because again, rear foot elevated split squat's only going to have 60, I think 68% of the load on the working leg versus a one leg squat's going to have 100% of the, or 84% of body weight anyway on that working leg. Uh, and then a regular, I think it's like 68 for rear foot elevated, and then like 60 for split squat, and then 50 for a step up. So that's
Okay.
sort of, we'll sort of move step up, split squat, rear foot elevated split squat, one leg squat,
Yeah.
stepping our way up that percentage ladder in terms of body weight.
Yep. Okay, awesome. Ken Vick had a great post on, he said, many practitioners train elasticity, put that in quotes, like it's one thing. It's probably not. Your body has different structures to store elastic energy, and they likely work at different speeds. Consider both, and you'll have more tools for your athletes. So, what I wanted to ask, and basically what he was saying is, like with when it comes to the stretch shortening cycle, um, there's some different, and he showed some examples in the post, like a volleyball player going down on a slow squat, waiting for things to happen to explode. So it wasn't just this really quick up and down. Um, did this make you think, or were you already training, feeling like you're training both fast and slow?
No, Ken's stuff has been really helpful lately in terms of making me think. He was the one, I don't know if we talked about this, but when we were talking about depth jumps and depth drops, he was the one who said you've got to decide whether you want shocks or springs.
Yes, that's what he in the post.
And so I think that idea of, okay, what am I training for? And if you think it always goes back, obviously we love the car analogies, but when you think about the car analogies, you need a car that has both shocks and springs. You don't want a car that has springs but no shocks, and you don't want a car that has shocks but no springs. So you've got to really be able to look at that and think, I want both. And then I've got to think of what are the circumstances in which I might need more reliance on shocks, obviously landing, and then springs, obviously rebounding and trying to decrease that landing time, and depending on how high. And then you get into, like he was saying, then you get into sort of the depth of squat, and that's where it's interesting. Matt McGinnis Watson has been talking a lot about, he calls them deep tier plyos, which are, it's interesting because they're not plyos because the response time is too long, but it basically involves jumping, hopping, things like that from deeper landing positions. So all that stuff, agree, disagree, doesn't make any difference. It all makes you think in terms of looking at your athletes and saying, okay, are we doing, is there some deeper positioning stuff that we need to be able to do? Are we landing? Are we working on landing at higher degrees of knee bend? So we're even doing now we're doing depth drop to split landings, which are putting us kind of in a deeper landing position. So we're playing with this stuff more, and I don't know, I wouldn't say we have it all figured out at all,
Yeah.
but I think we've got maybe a better menu of exercises that we're working off of. And even I said this in my Ireland presentation when we started talking about power. I said, okay, we probably jump training is probably a better term, because really the vast majority of what we're calling plyos aren't plyos in the more kind of specific definition. So I think we have to look at that as jump training or hop training or bound training. I don't know what the and maybe it's just reactive training, right? Maybe reactive training covers shocks and springs better than plyometric training, because reactive maybe allows you to think a little bit more about the force absorption part of it, or I shouldn't even say force management, because Hunter Eisenhower had established for us that we're not absorbing force, we're just managing it. So when we look at, excuse me, jumps, hops, bounds, initially what we're trying to do is manage landing forces, manage our relationship with the ground, because what we're talking about, and we talked in the island seminar, is that your ground reaction force is kind of friend and foe simultaneously, because it is the ground reaction force that will eventually produce that plyometric response, but it's also the ground reaction force, or the inability to manage the ground reaction force, that will produce either the injury or the itis. So you've got to be able to look at it that way.
I feel like part of this made me think, okay, what can I do a little differently? And I am working with adults, and I thought, wow, I'm actually doing this by accident. With some rotational jumps where I kind of use that, like we rotate onto the, like, let's say right side, I rotate down and load it, more of a Jason Glass thing, load and explode. And so it's a slow piece. And then I'm doing some quick turns as well. And I feel like the golf swing with people, my golfers, that really helps, because the backswing is so slow, which would be that kind of slower stretch shortening cycle. But then there's that quick hip turn. And same thing, I feel like with a bound, sometimes not a bound, a diagonal bound, but a bound back and forth, what I would call maybe more of a skater, but where I work for so long on the stability piece, the stick piece, before I let them go what I would call quick and stick. But I feel like that's working on that kind of the slower one, and then working on the faster one. Would you agree with that? Am I on the right track with that?
I think you're on the right track. I always think the thing you have to be careful of there is people's inability to manage the rotary forces, because I think it's the same idea in terms of I started writing an article years ago that I never finished, called Preventative or Provocative. And it was about that idea of people sort of doing 90-degree hops and things, trying to hop 90 land, hop 90 backland, whatever it was. And you start looking at this and you wonder, at what point do you pass from preventative to provocative? At some point, I'm ceasing to prevent an injury, and I'm probably going to provoke the negative response that I didn't want, where you look at it and think somebody might just get hurt doing this because I've over challenged them. So I think particularly in the adult population, that's where we really have to be careful, because you've got people who really don't have the proprioceptive ability and the stability to handle change of direction in a unilateral sense. So it's one of those where you're going, I want to do a little of this. Like you said, skaters sometimes, like we may look at skaters, or what we would call lateral bounds, and think, hey, we may stay with lateral bound for a really long time, and no quick and stick, no nothing, because we just are trying to get them to be able to manage force in the frontal plane in a sort of smooth manner.
Yes, Mike, I can tell you, I do not have everybody doing quick and stick. Takes a long time to get to. I'm like, we're not even, we need to eat our steak before we have our dessert. And they can't stabilize when they're jumping over to that side enough for me to feel comfortable with them to kind of go right back very quickly. And by the way, with the rotational quick ones, I never do like 180 or even 90 quick and come right back. I go to about 45 degrees, really quick feet. So yeah, I agree. The people that I'm working with, there's no way I want to challenge that piece of it, because you're right. They're just not prepared for that. Mike, finish on this one. Dan Baker quote. Let me actually read it. It was a great one. It was in your presentation, I guess. It must be remembered that field sport athletes' practical observation has shown that most of the skill and tactical training undertaking are at long, slow distance type of speeds and heart rates. Thus, given that skill and tactical training with the sports coach is the major form of training performed by field sport athletes for most of the season, and this training involves cardiovascular stimulation at the lower end of the polarity spectrum, the role of the strength and conditioning coach is to provide a high intensity stimulus to improve aerobic fitness. So, my question for you is, does that mean we should be trying our best to make sure that our athletes are doing more long, slow distance in the off season? Because you're preaching that they're not playing. I know you want them to play a different
No,
sport.
it's interesting. So that I would reverse it. Our problem is that they are doing that in the off season now. Everybody's training year round. And I think this is why I always go back, sort of, I always say like the American football model where there really is an off season. And that's the model that we've always followed,
Yeah.
where we think, okay, football season's over, we need to do conditioning. But I think the point, like, you had your hockey guys, they're getting, if they go and do an hour on ice workout, it's like they're getting a ton of that, zone 2 stuff, that low, mid-range heart rate stuff, and probably what they're not getting, unless they do, like you said, those small area games, they don't get that high-end stimulus. So if we look at somebody annualized over the year from practice, they're getting tons of long, slow distance, and then they're not getting the higher intensity stuff. So that's what I think. That's why I love that quote, because it's very illustrative. And I just sent somebody had said, "Can you send me the soccer stats again about typically what happens in a soccer game?" And I'm gonna pull it up because I want to be accurate.
I will say, great point. Because even if it's stick time for the kids, like let's say it's 3 months of they're not quote unquote playing, even in the summer spring league, and they're going out there with twice a week with just playing stick and puck. You're right. That is all. You're still getting the heart rate up, but really at a zone 2, maybe
Yeah.
zone 3.
Yeah. Action performed in percent of the game. So in a soccer game, standing 18% of the game, walking forward and backward 36% of the game, jumping 2% of the game, jogging 16% of the game, low speed running 15%, moderate speed running 10%, high speed running 2%,
Oh
sprint
wow,
1%.
wow.
So when you look at, if you kind of total up that middle, moderate, low speed jogging, 25, 35, 42, and then you add walking 36, you're at almost 80% of the
Yeah,
team is something between a walk and a slow jog. So that's why I always said, like, you look at soccer and think, oh, we need to get them, doing more distance running. You think they get plenty of long, slow. What they don't get enough of is the high speed stuff. And that's what Baker, I think he was referring more. He's Australian, but I think he was probably talking more, more rugby, more Aussie rules football or whatever. But almost every sport that you observe, probably with the exception of American football, is you're going to get a lot of that kind of mid, if you're looking at bands, you're going to get tons of that mid band to low band and not enough of the high band. So our job is to put the highs in and let the lows and the mids happen from practice, from skill work. Like I said, if you just went out, you go out for 45 minutes on the ice by yourself, and then you look at your my zone when you're done, you're probably going to see, wow, I spent a lot of time between 120 and 160.
yeah,
And and then I look and think, oh, I'm going to get on the bike and do a zone 2 workout and try to do, 30 minutes at 120. And you look and think, no, what I probably really want to do is, do the Andy Galpin thing and think, hey, I want to rev that engine up. I want to try to, I want to try to get in the red. I want to try to get 165, 166, 167 in this workout versus just doing more of what I've already done a lot of.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Coach, thanks for doing this. Coming off the plane yesterday, overseas. Appreciate you. I wasn't even going to email you. I was going to be like, don't, but I
Glad you
appreciate you
did.
doing it.
That's good. I'm gonna. I might take a little nap right now. Catch up on a little sleep.
There you go.
And
All
then
right, Coach.
back
We'll talk
at
to
it.
you next time.
Thanks, Ian.